Welcome back to Company Grip Guitar. I am Ben, and this is my 2022 Les Paul Custom. So if you've been watching my channel for a while, you've probably seen this guitar pop up at least 2 or 3 different times. I think the most recent time was the how to spot a fake Gibson Les Paul video, and maybe a couple times before that, and then the big debut of this guitar was the My Dream Guitar video that I made, which was all about kind of like my 20-year hunt for a guitar with these specifications. I actually rewatched it before doing this video and found it kind of cheesy, but that's neither here nor there. This video is about the actual specs of this guitar, as every time the guitar does make an appearance, I usually get a couple comments that are like, hey, break down that guitar. We want to see what's inside of that, because, you know, every Les Paul Custom is kind of a little bit different. They make batches one way, then next year the batches are done a different way. Some retailers will have special specifications and unique specifications, and this guitar happens to fall into that category of being a Les Paul Custom that was made for American Musical Supply, so it has its own unique specifications as well. So that's what I'm going to get to in this video. Now, I understand that the Les Paul Custom is not exactly the most unique design these days. I mean, this dates back to about 1957 when Les Paul himself said, hey, I want something that's a little bit classier than the gold top, something that kind of is more akin to a tuxedo, and that's when they came out with the Les Paul Custom for him. So this video might be better served as a reference for those of you that want to get into Les Pauls or maybe are new to the entire Gibson Les Paul Custom thing. So this guitar is a Les Paul Custom VOS that I purchased from American Musical Supply in 2022. Now the VOS stands for Vintage Original Spec, and what that means is the guitar has a certain look of wear to it. As they describe it, a well-worn guitar that still functions like it's brand new. So you get things like a little bit of patina on the stop bar and the bridge here. The finish has got a little bit of cloudiness to it, but you're not going to find a crazy amount of wear on it like you would with some of the Murphy Labs that have finish checking or chips of wood in them, and ironically, the more money you spend, the more used they look. This guitar I would consider to be right at the edge of what I would pay for a used looking guitar. Generally, I want my guitars to look brand new, but every other specification on this guitar checked off a certain box of what I was looking for, and I figured the VOS I could live with. And honestly, to this day, it doesn't bother me at all. Now, the American Musical Supply VOS guitars, as I mentioned before, checked off a number of boxes for the Les Paul Custom that I had been looking for decades. That was mostly nickel hardware, ebony, you've got keystone tuners up here, and lastly, Custombuckers. Also, this is going to be one of the last Les Paul Customs you could get for under $4,000. American Musical Supply had this guitar, or the Alpine White version, selling for $3,999. Now, if you look at the Gibson website today, a comparable guitar, the Gibson Les Paul Custom Nickel, sells for $5,500, which is a $1,500 price increase over this guitar, and that's just 3 years after I bought this, not even a full 3 years. Also, what I think is better about this guitar versus the nickel one that's out right now is this has a better set of pickups. I also like that they're open face, whereas the new Gibson Les Paul Custom Nickel has the 490-498T pickup combination, which they're okay pickups, but I would think for a Les Paul Custom, you should have a maybe more special set of pickups available. The case that came with this guitar is the same case that you would find on any guitar that came out of the Gibson Custom shop, with the exception that this was before Gibson had reacquired the Lifton rights. So what we've got here is the Gibson Custom Shop badge on the side here, all these gold latches, and we open it up and we see that on the inside we've got a plush yellow interior. And then we've got the pocket, of course, and inside the pocket is the Gibson Custom Shop hang tag. Here's a bridge that came on the guitar. I'll go more into that in a little bit here. Then we've got a plastic pickup switch cavity cover, in case you don't want the Gibson Custom Shop medallion. The original 3-ply pick guard, which I'll go over that in a minute too. 2 entire sets of keys for some reason. The gold warranty information slip. And lastly, the Custom Shop Certificate of Authenticity booklet. So you might have noticed that there was no Gibson multi-tool, or actually any tools at all, to adjust this guitar. When I got my 1961 reissue Les Paul guitar, that also didn't have any tools in it. So I'm curious if that's just my bad luck, or if Gibson is confident enough in the way that they set up their guitars before they send them out, that it's not something you need to worry about. I doubt it's that. So what we've got here is a bound 1-piece mahogany back on this guitar, and on the front here we've got a bound 2-piece maple top. The binding on the top is a 7-ply alternating white, black, white, black, white, black, white. And on the back side, we've got an alternating 5-ply white, black, white, black, white binding. Now this would finish the tuxedo look that Les Paul himself was looking for when he wanted to class up the Les Paul gold top a bit. Now one thing that always surprised me was that the Les Paul Custom was the same thickness as a Les Paul Standard, and I think it's just because of the white binding, but it just always looked like it was going to be a little bit thicker, maybe 1/8 of an inch. But if you take calipers to the edge of this, you're going to get the same 2 inches that you would find on a gold top or any other Les Paul Standard. Moving on to the neck here, we've got a solid mahogany neck. Now the fretboard on this guitar is a Bolivian rosewood, or what's more commonly known in the guitar world as Pau Ferro. Now my initial thoughts on this are, firstly, this is either the darkest Pau Ferro I have ever seen in my life, thank God, or B, perhaps the spec sheet that was listed for this guitar had the wrong fretboard material listed, and maybe it's more of a dark Indian rosewood, but I'm really no wood expert, so I couldn't tell you that for certain. And heading up to the top of the neck here, we've got the larger headstock size. This is also bound with a 5-ply white, black, white, black, white binding. For measurements on this neck, we've got a 1.66 nut made of corian. At the first fret here, we're getting a 0.84, and down here at the 12th fret, we're getting a 0.97 inches. This is what Gibson likes to call the chunky 50s C profile, and it is a nice symmetrical C shape, and one of my favorite necks, actually, that Gibson makes. Now, if you're curious of the angle degrees on this guitar, if I zero out the meter on the neck, I'm getting an angle back from the body of about 3.4 degrees for the neck, and for the headstock, I'm getting an angle back of just over 17 degrees. So the angles on this guitar match a modern Les Paul model. Now, one of my favorite features on this guitar, as I mentioned before, is the all-nickel hardware. I haven't really been so much of a fan of gold hardware ever since it started rubbing off on my Les Paul Smartwood that I'd only had for a couple months. Ever since then, I kind of swore it off for new guitars, unless it was a special occasion like this Koa SG. But for the nickel hardware on this guitar, one of my favorite things. I do think maybe they took the VOS aging a little bit too far here. If you look at these stop bar posts, you can see it's a little bit worse for wear there. But starting at the bottom of the guitar here, we've got these vintage style strap buttons, very small. I actually don't really trust them too much. We've got one down there at the bottom and then one up here at the top, of course. I don't know why they didn't use the more modern oversized strap buttons, because it's not exactly like this guitar is a reissue of a 57. They've certainly made some of their own decisions with the accessories on it, so I don't know why they went with these really tiny strap buttons. Moving over from there, we get to our nickel jack plate matching the rest of the hardware on this guitar. Up on the face here, we get our nickel stop bar and our nickel tune-o-matic bridge. An interesting story about this bridge here, when it first arrived, it was completely collapsed, making the guitar mostly unplayable. That's why I had an extra bridge in the case there. So I called it the Gibson Custom Shop. I told them the bridge was collapsed as soon as I opened the box. And they overnighted me a new bridge, which was nice of them, but I wanted to know why it was collapsed, because the box that the guitar shipped in was brand new looking, the case was brand new looking, the posts weren't bent at all. And honestly, if this guitar went through an inspection at the Custom Shop or American Musical Supply, nobody would have signed off on this. Now, their theory at the Custom Shop was maybe there was a chemical reaction with the VOS chemicals and possibly a bad batch of bridges, and as the guitar sat in the case, the tension from the strings collapsed that bridge. That's not the most uncommon thing to happen to a Les Paul. It just doesn't happen on brand new ones. It's more for the guitars that have been sitting in a case for 20 or 30 years. I don't really have any ideas why. It's an unsolved mystery, but happy to say that the new bridge has been on this guitar for a few years now, and so far, not collapsed. So above the bridge here, we've got our two open-faced Custombuckers here, right? Surprise, no, the spec sheet was wrong. These are actually Burstbucker pickups, Burstbucker 1 in the neck and a Burstbucker 2 in the bridge here. Believe it or not, I've never actually taken the pickups out of this guitar until doing the prep work for this video, but I'm honestly not that surprised. As I've been playing this guitar over the past couple years, I've noticed that it doesn't sound quite the same as two other guitars I have that have Custombuckers, one of which I installed myself, so I know those are Custombuckers. This guitar has always sounded maybe a little bit colder than those and not quite as airy as the Custombuckers, and I guess this really explains why. Now this leads me to two thoughts. First of all, I'm glad that it at least has Burstbuckers instead of the 490-498 combo. I think these are better pickups that suit this guitar a little bit better. And my second thought is I think this finally gives me a reason to install the Series 2 Gibson $1,000 PAF pickups in a guitar and leave them in there permanently. I know those are an obvious cash grab, but honestly, the Series 2 sounds really good. You can check them out in this video up here and tell me if you disagree. Now you might be saying, wait a minute, that spec sheet says it's got those pickups. You should complain about that. Well, yeah, it's been a couple years, and also if you dig around on the Gibson website, I can't tell you exactly where, but there's a little disclaimer somewhere that says whatever the specs are don't exactly always match what they ship out due to supply issues or changing trends, and they can't keep the website constantly up to date. So it is what it is at this point, right? But what I can give you is the actual specs for these Burstbucker pickups. So in the bridge here, what I'm getting is an 8.22. Moving up to the neck pickup, I've got a 7.59. And right there in the middle, we've got a 3.94. Check out these cavities though, real nice and clean looking. We've got the long neck tenon, which is always a good sign. Moving over from there, we get to our controls here. Now we've got 2 volumes, 2 tones, nothing special about these controls at all. No push-pulls, none of that malarkey. We've got just standard controls that do one job. Now let's turn the guitar over and flip open the cavity and look in there. And yeah, you can see it's pretty unremarkable, actually. You'll notice we've got the ceramic disc capacitors instead of Gibson's current favorite flavor, the orange drop caps. These are also 500K audio taper pots for both the volumes and the tones. Flipping back around to the front here, we get to our medium jumbo frets. There are 22 of them on this guitar. These ones are measuring at about 44 thousandths, which is a little bit lower than the usual measurement that I get on a Gibson guitar, which is kind of hovering more around 50 thousandths, but these feel great. Moving up from there, we get to our truss rod underneath the cover here. Looks pretty clean, we can't really complain about that. And then lastly, we get to our Grover Rotomatic tuners. Now, as silly as this sounds, these are probably one of the main reasons why I wanted this guitar, because I love these metal Keystone tuners. I think it's the best looking tuner on any guitar out there. I know that sounds silly, I know you can change them out, but the fact that it came with them I thought was really cool. In case you're curious, these are coming in at a 14:1 ratio, so they're pretty decent tuners, not the best, but they do the trick. Now if we move down from there to the backside of the guitar, we get to our Gibson Custom Shop medallion. Now just in case you don't want this really cool looking thing there, you can pull it out and they do send you a plastic one that you can put in its place. I'm curious, anybody that's out there that has a Custom Shop guitar, have you swapped out your Custom Shop medallion for a plastic one? I don't know who would do that. I think this just looks so much better, but I guess maybe if you want a more authentic look, that would make sense, but I'm not trying to fool anyone. A couple more things about this guitar before we get to the sound test. So first off, we've got Bomber Betty here on the pickguard. That is not the original pickguard, no surprise. Original pickguard is a 3-ply black, white, black pickguard, which is sitting in the case, but I had this thing laying around and I just wanted to use it, and I like the way it looks. All the other plastics on the guitar are black, which is matching the aesthetic here. We've got the black switch tip, we've got the black poker chip, the black pickup rings, we've got the black speed knobs down here with the white numbering. We've got the really nice binding all around the guitar, as I mentioned, and up there at the headstock. Then on the neck itself, we've also got binding, which is no surprise in the black fret markers. Moving on to the neck itself, or the fretboard rather, we've got mother of pearl block inlays. These are real mother of pearl, which is a really nice look. Also matches the giant split diamond inlay up here at the top, which is mother of pearl. And then lastly, the Gibson logo, which is also mother of pearl. We've got the Les Paul Custom truss rod cover there. And I think the last thing to talk about is this cavity cover, which is also black. Now that we've listed all the materials of this guitar and all the specifications, you might be wondering, well, what does it weigh? Well, this guitar, with its 9-hole weight relief, still comes in at 9.89 pounds, or about 9 pounds and a little bit over 14 ounces, making this guitar the 3rd heaviest guitar I've had on my channel. Not surprisingly, behind 2 other Les Pauls, a Slash Anaconda Les Paul, and at number 1, that would be the Ugly Duckling Gold Top that I reviewed probably about a month or 2 months ago. As far as the feel of this guitar goes, I would say one notable advantage of the Les Paul Custom is that with the squared off edges that the binding provides, it has a tendency to dig into your legs a little bit more and have more grip so it doesn't slide off. But no, all joking aside, how does it feel? It feels like any other Les Paul. Awesome, legendary, and heavy. What really makes this guitar special to me is the history of it, the modern day evolution of the Black Beauty guitar that Les Paul himself had requested from Gibson. He wanted to take a gold top, class it up, make it look like it was dressed in a tuxedo, and make it look really good on TV. And this is just the original Les Paul Custom before any custom shop ever existed. Now I'm going to run through the sound test, and I'll put all the settings on the side over here so you can see what pickups I'm using or what volume and tone controls I'm using. These days I'm miking up a Bugera V5 amplifier, and I'm running it clean, But if you hear a little bit of crunchiness or distortion, I'm using either this pedal here, which is the Wampler Tumnus, or this one here, which is the Joyo American Sound pedal. And I'll have little icons on the screen so you can see which ones of those I'm using at the time as well. Occasionally I'll add delay or reverb when I'm editing. That's all done in PreSonus Studio One software and not an actual real pedal. This is a good time to mention that I've restrung my guitar with my favorite strings, and those are Stringjoy Broadway Customs. I've actually selected each gauge of each string to fit my playing style. Check them out if you'd like this freedom and flexibility as well. Now let's get into the sound test. Well, there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed my review of my 2022 Les Paul Custom, a guitar that I've always wanted ever since I got my first guitar, a Jackson Dinky for $169. And I looked up at the top of Guitar Center and I said, what is that guitar? I want one of those. Well, that was one of these, a Les Paul Custom. Honestly, fantastic guitar. There's not really much I can say about it that hasn't been said before. I do think I'm going to swap these pickups out for the Gibson Series 2 1959 PAF clones. Maybe I'll do a video A/B comparison of the Custombuckers in those. You guys let me know if that's something you want to hear. Now, if you like content like this and you haven't subscribed yet, might be a good time to. That way you can keep up to date on just what I'm doing these days. I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video, and I will talk to you next time.